Hello, everybody. So, if you were attending last week, you may have noticed that I tried to do a presentation and it didn't work. So, if you did attend live and wanted to see that presentation and you missed it, in the comments of that live, I went ahead and put a link. I reshot it and put a link in there. So therefore you can actually see the presentation. I also uploaded it onto the YouTube page. So if you're new to this, my name is Kevin. Live with Kevin is the name of the game here. Been doing this for a while now. So there's a lot of old ones that you can look on the YouTube page for if you want to find some previous discussed topics. Um, Today we're talking about basically whether or not your dog takes treats gently or not. So I think whether working in group classes or whether working with dogs privately, something that I or our staff sees a lot of is basically dogs taking treats with a lot of force behind it. And I mean, there's a couple different reasons why. We'll kind of dive into that. So I want to make sure that I can see any comments that come up. So if any comments come up, I'll be able to see it. But so let's kind of dive in. This is about, one, does your dog treat gently? If then you probably don't need to watch this. But if they don't, which a lot of dogs either are not taking them gently, like situationally, that's a common one, or across the board. Some just take them hard across the board. Some it's situationally. So let's take a look. So in this training, you will learn ways to deliver treats. And so the idea with that is if we deliver it in a certain way, it can decrease the mouthiness. So there's that. We're going to talk about what to do if your dog grabs the treat too hard. So you're going to give it to your dog and he really gets you good. What do you do? What's the best option there? So we'll talk about that. Then there's also things that I have found that can make it worse, which is, the opposite of what we want, obviously. But there are certain things that once our dogs start to take it rough, we anticipate it, and then we do things that oftentimes I've found that makes it worse. So we'll dive in there and we'll have some fun. So let's go to the next slide. If it will go, there we go. I wanted to just put this in because who doesn't love a corgi? And corgis love treats. All dogs do, but he's kind of cute, so I wanted to put that in. I love treats. So let's go with 3 ways to deliver treats. The first way I want to talk about is, depending on the scenario, you may be able to put the treat on the ground. Some different examples. One, if you're doing a downstay, which in your home, using a downstay is great across the board. So you can actually just put the food on the ground in front of your dog. So that's one way. Another way, hold the treat in your open hand. So, and we're going to dive into each of these points a little bit more in depth, but hold the treat in an open hand. Also, delivering the treat at a better angle, and I'll explain that more in depth as well. But these are a couple different things that we can do. So, let's take a look. On the ground, these 2 dogs are getting a treat for lying on the ground. So, it's good for stay. So, it's really good for stay. I mentioned that a second ago. Maybe not a sit stay. I mean, it's probably not going to ruin a sit stay, but it's great for a down stay because if they're holding a down stay like these 2 dogs are, for example, then the piece of food can be put on the ground, and that's not going to cause them to get up. Another thing that's putting the food on the ground, it keeps your hands cleaner. So depending on if you do have a dog that's engulfing your whole hand in his or her mouth when you're giving a treat, you might end up with a wet, sticky hand after, which in some cases it doesn't matter. But when you are trying to have clean hands because you're cooking or something, you don't necessarily want to have your hand covered in drool. So rewarding on the ground can also keep your hands cleaner. And then also another perk is the mouth just doesn't make contact with your hand, obviously. So it just basically, your dog can't take it hard because he or she's not making contact with your hand. So on the ground is great. Another one that I didn't put on here is, you have these different scenarios. Like if you're doing something to do with like reactive towards dogs or people, and you want to either just work on, leave its or eye contact or find its, or you're simply just trying to change your dog's association, you can deliver the food on the ground. And what that'll do is basically save yourself, because a lot of times if you're in a moment where it's too stressful and you're too close to the dog or person or whatever, your dog may eat, but he or she may also have a mouth that is harder because of the stress. So meaning you go to give them the treat and they turn and grab it, but they also get part of your hand. And so putting it on the ground is another good way to kind of do that. So certain situations, putting the treat on the ground is an awesome option. So we also have open hand. So this, open hand prevents your fingers from entering the mouth. And I think that's the problem when you're going to deliver a treat. Oftentimes we hold it between our fingers and we go and give it this way, and our dog go whoosh, and they basically get their whole their whole mouth in our hands, and their teeth hit our fingers, and it just doesn't feel good. So by delivering it like in this photo, you have it open hand style. That makes it easier. And I oftentimes will hold the piece of food with my thumb between my two digits right here. And so as I'm going to deliver it and I hit the dog's mouth, I move my thumb out of the way. And so basically I almost end up slapping it in the dog's mouth. So I've got the treat here, boom, hits their mouth and I let go. And so if this is their mouth, boom, they eat it right out of your hand. If they do make any contact with your hand with their teeth, they're doing it on this part of your finger, and that really just doesn't hurt compared to, the whole fingers and mouth thing. So it prevents your fingers from entering their mouth. And so, yeah, there's just less room for error. And in certain situations, like when you're doing like leash walking, if you're trying to reward your dog for walking with you and you go to hand it to them, they might get your whole hand. But if you open hand style and kind of slap it in their mouth, it basically makes it a lot easier. So certain scenarios, you'll end up wanting to do that. If I am going to reward a sit, I'll do that. And again, you could try to put it on the ground if you're doing a sit stay, but ultimately on the ground for a down stay is better. But in general, rewarding them when they're excited, you also might want to do this open hand method because you're getting your thumb out of the way, you're getting your fingertips out of the way. If anybody has any questions or comments, feel free to leave them. I can read them as I go here. So let's move on. Come on, let's move on. So better angle. What this means to me, and I look at the angle in this picture and it actually kind of gives you a good angle. So a lot of times people, depending on the size of your dog, you might end up trying to, instead of giving it straight into their mouth, they end up like, we end up like reaching from the sky down towards their mouth, which means that they end up kind of launching up for the treat instead of going straight for it. This is my dog's mouth right here. They end up launching for it. And I found that when the treat is being delivered downward and the dog ends up launching for it, it ends up meaning more hand and mouth, less. Did I say that right? More hand and mouth, yeah. And basically they get the whole. It's not a very gentle way of doing it. So could try if this is the dog here, you deliver the treat straight in. That can be handy. Instead of going this way, you go straight in. I've also found too that, and I'll talk more about this in a second, but if you just kind of shove it on in there, I'm not saying like, put your whole fist in their mouth, but instead of like trying to get it in the front of their mouth, if you kind of put it on the back of their tongue, then that also leads to a softer mouth. You are going to have a pretty wet hand, of course, though. But so instead of coming like at a diagonal angle from where you're standing down to them, try to come almost like you're bowling into their mouth and go, I know this is kind of awkward here, but go straight in. And I found that can help as well. So consider that. And again, less room for error here in terms of that angle. So that might be a simple fix though. Just switch up the angle of which you're feeding. All right, let's move on. So what not to do? Here's a couple of things because we can kind of develop this, I feel like, in a lot of dogs. So let's go. Let's talk about it. I found that like sometimes people are hesitant to give the treat for obvious reasons because they're anticipating that whole mouth on hand. And so I'm going to use the camera as the angle here so they go to give the treat, and as they are about to give it, they let it go and they pull their hand away really quickly. So, or like if this is the dog's mouth, it's like, and they pull their hand really away quickly. And I found that also causes the dog to anticipate the hand being pulled away, and then the treat's going as well. So they start launching towards it, and you end up having this where you're going, and you pull your hand away at the last second, the dog launches and kind of lunges for it. I found that makes a mouthier dog. So if you're going to, and I just mentioned this, if you're going to treat from your hand with your fingertips, one of the easiest things you could do, which might feel a little odd, is instead of like trying to get it on the tip of their tongue, really stick it in their mouth. Again, not trying to choke them, obviously, but stick it in there. So therefore it's going in their mouth, and they'll find less reason to launch for it if you kind of commit to it. But if you're kind of like, then you're going to get a dog that's lunging a bit more. So what to do, one of them is give the treat and pull away at the last second. Another one is tossing the treat. I do feel like in certain situations, tossing a treat is fine. But if I'm always like standing up and my dog is sitting and I'm always tossing my treats to him, I mean, there's a very good chance when you go to hand it to him, your dog is going to psh and launch for it and get your hand. I've, so tossing treats in general, I try not to do it. A lot of times I'm trying to do what we'd call feeding for position, which means if you want them in a sit, feed them in a sit. If you want them in a down, feed them in a down. And if you start doing that, and if you really want to, so this isn't a part of it, but feeding position oftentimes causes a more relaxed version of the behavior. So if a dog's in a down and they're always fed in the down, they generally just kick their hips over and relax and wait patiently. Whereas if they're in a sit and you ask them to down and they down and then you throw the treat to the side, I found that they are oftentimes very amped up and excited and they're ready to pounce. So therefore, you're getting them more amped up and more excited. So you're feeding them out of position. It doesn't, and I've personal experience. I used to feed out of position a lot with my dog V. You end up the behavior isn't as good from what I found in terms of having a nice relaxed version of it. So tossing the treat can make things worse as well. So certain situations, I'm sure you can get away with it. Or like if you're tossing it on the ground because you're doing a find it or you're trying to walk, whatever, that's fine. But in situations where you're trying to get them to sit or down and you toss it, that can make them kind of grabbier too. Um, so let's go back for a second though. Oh no, how do I get to back? Yeah. Okay. Um, so what not to do? Yeah, there's all that. So let's go to our next slide. What do you do if your dog melts too hard in the moment? And I generally, my best bet is if I'm feeding a dog and I am using the fingertip method and I stick it in, if one of the times they really take it hard, I try to have a really good grip on it so I can remove it and basically say, too bad or something like that. So let's talk about this though. Things you can do. I don't know this photo. I think I left it in there from the last one accidentally. So you can hold on tight and pull it back out and try again. So you basically stick it in and your dog, and you could say, oh, let me pull it back out. You can also say, you could use too bad for the first one and do that. You can also, for the second one, say too bad and take it away and make them wait 15 or 20 minutes before they get to try again. And that's different situations. Like if you're doing a training session and you're practicing stuff with your dog, the second option definitely works really well. If you're working in a real life scenario and you have the liberty to just walk away 15 or 20 minutes, the first option is going to be a bit better. But ultimately, what we do if we have good timing is if they take it rough, we could tell them too bad, and we could teach them that behavior leads to them not getting the treat. And so that would be the opposite of what they're not thinking necessarily. I can't get in their heads, but I don't think they're thinking I need to take this hard. They're just so excited. And then, I mean, inevitably, if they're taking it hard and that's getting them the treat, that is being rewarded, and we're going to see more of it most likely. So, basically, though, try to remove it if they do it. You can also change your behavior, and what that really means is go to the prior slides, what we just talked about, how you can deliver treats in a different way to get them to take it more gently. One thing I didn't mention yet, and I'll mention now, is I know there are plenty of people out there who um, are attempting, and some are successful at their dog a gentle cue, like take it gently. Um, and I'm sure in some scenarios that can work. I think in other scenarios, it's going to cause the dog to miss the mark. And what I mean by that is if you're trying to communicate to them about something, let's say your dog's very excited about other dogs and you're trying to teach your dog how to look at a dog and look back at you for a food reward. Let's say that's our goal. And your dog looks at the dog and you say, look back at me. And your dog does it. And you go to treat them. And as you're going to treat them, you're like, gentle, gentle, gentle. Maybe it'll work and maybe it won't mess anything up. But there is a slight chance that by doing that, your dog is now going to be thinking about something completely different, which is taking a treat gently and not realizing that his or her behavior of looking away from the dog and looking back at you is what's earning the reward. Maybe, maybe not. I'm just trying to lay it out there that technically we are delaying the reward. We're also introducing another cue. Dogs, if the order of events is always the same, it could work out fine. But if we're like mixing it up a lot, our dogs could end up losing what's going on and what's actually earning them the reward. So, but in general, change your behavior. So let's talk about your homework, and then I want to recap all that. But your homework is test the different treat delivering methods and see what works best for you. So if you have a dog that's taking treats hard, you have different options. One is you could try the open hand method and you could go underneath. You could have your thumb and move your thumb away. You could feed from the ground. So there's those some options there. And we talked to you about maybe some things that you don't want to do. So tossing treats may or may not be beneficial in the long run. Um, and just remember all this. And then a lot of consistency is what's going to be needed here as well. So think about all that. Try to get them to take it more gently by as well. If it happens, you can say too bad and you can pull it back out. Or if you really want to punish them, you can say too bad and remove it for 15 or 20 minutes. Or if you want to go very high magnitude, you say, oh, too bad, and they don't get anything good other than they need, obviously, for the rest of the day. So it kind of depends. If you're doing a training session, you could say, oh, too bad, you're going to lose for 15 or 20 minutes or longer. But if it's a real life scenario, you're going to want to say too bad, remove it, but then try again. So just some food for thought there. Thank you all for watching. Have a good rest of your day. Feel free to, leave any comments in here, and I will talk to y'all later. Thanks.